Marcus Webb had been sitting in the dark cabin for 40 minutes, watching through the window, when the wolf appeared for the third night in a row. Not at the treeline this time. Closer, walking directly toward the east wall, and stopping right at the point where the exhaust pipe met the logs. It stood there for a full minute. Then it turned its head and looked straight at the window. Straight at him. Marcus didn't know it yet, but he had a carbon monoxide leak. Had been breathing it for 4 days. His detectors were dead. And the only thing that had come to warn him, 3 nights in a row, from the darkness of the forest, was a wolf. The cabin sat at the end of a forest road that wasn't on any map that mattered. A track of packed earth winding 11 miles from the nearest paved road through lodgepole pine and spruce, crossing a shallow creek twice before descending into the small clearing where the cabin stood. The forest came close on all sides, and in winter, when the snow covered the ground and the trees held their snow-loaded branches low, it felt closer. Marcus Webb had built the cabin with his father 12 years earlier. It had 2 rooms and a loft and a wood stove that could heat the whole space in an hour if you fed it properly. No electricity, no telephone line. A satellite phone for emergencies, kept on a shelf near the door. A propane generator if needed. Otherwise, fire, water from the creek, food you brought with you. He came here every November. Had done so for 8 years since his father died. He was 54 years old, a retired civil engineer, and he liked the quiet. He liked waking in the dark and feeding the wood stove and watching the first light find the clearing through the frost on the window pane. He did not, particularly, like what had begun 3 nights ago. The wolf had come the first time on a Thursday. Marcus had been reading by lamplight when he noticed it. Not a sound exactly, but a presence. He set down his book and sat still and listened. The sound came a minute later, footsteps in snow. Not a deer's plunging step, something lighter, more deliberate. He went to the window, cupped his hands against the cold glass, and saw it in the moonlit snow. A large gray wolf moving slowly around the perimeter of the cabin. Not running, not hunting, simply walking, in a loose circuit that kept it about 20 feet from the walls, its head slightly lowered, ears forward. He watched it for 2 minutes before it moved back into the treeline and disappeared. The second night it came back. Same animal, same size, same coloring, same deliberate quality of movement. This time Marcus was ready, lamp turned low, chair positioned near the window. The wolf entered the clearing from the north edge, walked toward the cabin, and began its circuit. It moved without urgency. It did not approach the door or the windows. It simply moved around the cabin in that loose, methodical way, like something performing an inspection. Marcus watched for nearly 5 minutes before it left. He was not afraid exactly. He had been coming to this wilderness for 12 years and understood wolves well enough to know that they did not circle human structures for any purpose that ended badly for the human inside. But this was outside any behavior he had read about or heard described. Wolves sometimes lingered near cabins in winter, drawn by the smell of food. They did not circle. On the third night, Marcus did not try to sleep at all. He sat in the chair by the window, the lamp extinguished, the wood stove ticking as the metal expanded and contracted, and he waited. The wolf came at 12:40. It came from the south, walking quickly, as if it had come from a distance with a purpose. It entered the clearing without slowing. It walked directly to the east wall, the wall Marcus was sitting behind, and stopped. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. The wolf stood at the wall. Marcus sat in his chair. The wood stove ticked. Then the wolf moved sideways along the east wall. It stopped at the southeast corner, where the wood stove's exhaust pipe ran through the logs. It stood there with its head lowered, motionless, for close to a minute. Then it looked up, directly at the window. The eyes caught the faint light, moonlight or starlight, or the glow visible through the gap around the exhaust pipe, and for a moment they were clear, pale, steady, looking at the window from the dark. The wolf held the gaze for a long moment. Then it turned and walked back toward the treeline. Marcus picked up the satellite phone. The satellite phone connected to emergency dispatch, and the operator listened to Marcus describe the wolf's behavior without interrupting. When he finished, she asked clarifying questions. Was the wolf aggressive? No. Had it approached the door? No. Was he in immediate danger? Not from the wolf, he said. Not directly. She connected him to the Regional Wildlife Authority. The officer who came on the line was named Greta Sylvester, and she had been working in wolf management in this region for 9 years. She listened. Then, you said it stopped at the southeast corner, at the exhaust pipe. Yes, for about a minute. A silence. And you've been burning the wood stove? Continuously. It's November and I'm at altitude. Another silence. Longer. Mr. Webb, I want to ask you something. When did you last check your carbon monoxide detector? Marcus looked across the dark room at the wall where the detector was mounted. The small green light that indicated function was not lit. He stood up from the chair. He crossed the room and reached the detector. The digital display that should have shown a reading was dark. He pressed the test button. Nothing. Mr. Webb, the detector's dead, he said. Battery must have gone. I need you to open a window immediately. Her voice had changed, not panicked, but more direct. And get out of the cabin. Right now. Leave the door open behind you. He was already moving. The cold hit him the moment he opened the door. A clean shock after the sealed warmth of the cabin. He stepped out into the snow, his socks immediately soaking through, and breathed the outdoor air in long, deliberate breaths. Stay outside, Greta said. Keep the phone with you. Tell me if you start to feel dizzy or nauseous. He didn't. He stood in the clearing in the cold and breathed and looked at the cabin. Emergency services reached him before dawn. A 2-person crew in a snowmobile, dispatched after Greta's follow-up call. They brought a portable CO monitor, which they ran through the cabin before Marcus was cleared to re-enter. The reading at head height in the main room was 240 parts per million. The safe threshold for extended exposure was 35. The exhaust pipe was the source. The wood stove's exhaust ran through the wall at the southeast corner, the same corner where the wolf had stopped on the 3rd night. The pipe had been installed with a tight seal 12 years earlier. Over time, the joint where the pipe penetrated the log wall had worked loose. A millimeter at first, then more, as the logs settled and the freeze-thaw cycles of 12 winters moved the wood. The gap was now wide enough to pass carbon monoxide back into the room in significant quantities whenever the wood stove was running hard, which it had been continuously for 4 days. Marcus had experienced none of the classic acute symptoms, no headache, no nausea, none of the warning signs the safety literature described. What he had experienced, and not registered as a symptom, was a low-grade fatigue and a quality of sleep that had felt off for the past 3 nights. Not bad enough to notice, not good enough to explain. At low-level chronic exposure, those were exactly the symptoms. The kind of accumulation that went unnoticed until it was not. The CO monitor crew replaced the batteries in the detector. It came to life immediately, working correctly, a 3-year-old battery that had simply run out at the wrong time. They resealed the exhaust pipe joint. They cleared the cabin of the accumulated gas by opening all windows and running the door for 2 hours in the cold. Before they left, one of them walked the perimeter in the snow and found the wolf's tracks. The circuit around the cabin, preserved in the night's snowfall, and at the southeast corner, the place where the animal had stopped, a cluster of overlapping prints where it had stood and then moved and stood again. He photographed them. They were in the documentation alongside the CO readings and the exhaust pipe repair notes. Marcus Webb was not a man who talked easily about things he couldn't explain. He was a civil engineer. He had spent 30 years in a profession that valued precision and evidence and the careful separation of what was known from what was assumed. He understood the difference between an observation and a conclusion. He was not in the habit of drawing connections that the data did not support. What he had was data. A wolf on 3 consecutive nights, circling a cabin at close range. Behavior documented as outside normal wolf activity by the wildlife officer he had spoken to and subsequently confirmed in 2 separate expert consultations. A carbon monoxide leak, undetected by a dead detector, producing a chronic low-level exposure over 4 days. A wolf stopping specifically at the corner where the leak was located. Stopping and looking at the window. What he did not have was a mechanism. He did not know what a wolf can detect. He did not know whether the gases leaking from the exhaust pipe gap, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, combustion byproducts, were detectable at concentrations the outdoor air would have diluted to near zero by the time they reached an animal walking the perimeter. He did not know what had drawn the wolf to the cabin in the first place, or what had brought it back on consecutive nights, or what had made it stop and stand at that specific corner. He told the story once at a dinner in the spring to a group of people that included a veterinarian and a wildlife biologist. Both listened carefully. Neither dismissed it. The veterinarian mentioned that dogs had been documented detecting carbon monoxide in some studies. Not conclusively, but documented. The wolf's sense of smell was considerably more acute than a domestic dog's. It was not impossible. It was not, either of them said carefully, proven. Marcus nodded. He understood that. He had not expected it to be proven. He was not, at this stage of his life, particularly invested in proof for its own sake. What he was invested in was what had actually happened, the sequence of events as they had occurred, in the order they had occurred without embellishment. A wolf had circled his cabin for 3 nights. On the 3rd night, it had stopped at the corner where a leak was slowly poisoning the air inside. It had looked at the window. He had picked up the phone. He had been outside breathing clean air within 15 minutes of that look. He went back to the cabin the following November, as he always did. He had the exhaust system inspected before he drove up, a proper professional inspection, the kind he should have done every year and hadn't thought to. He replaced every battery in every detector in the cabin with lithium batteries rated for extreme cold. He brought a portable CO monitor as backup. He slept well that first night. The wood stove ticked and the forest was quiet, and he did not hear anything moving outside. He looked for the wolf on each of the 3 nights after he arrived. He didn't see it. This was, he told himself, entirely expected. There was no reason the same wolf would be in this section of forest in the same week 1 year later. Wolves ranged hundreds of kilometers. The wolf that had circled his cabin was an animal living its own life in a vast wilderness. And the 3 November nights it had spent moving around a log cabin were a footnote in a biography Marcus would never read. He went to sleep on the 4th night without looking. He thought he heard something move once in the snow outside. He lay still and listened, and the sound, if it had been a sound, did not come again. He closed his eyes.